No doubt.
There's some folks that say that there is no negative publicity, right? It is all publicity. And your show and ours, we both interviewed a rather some people would say infamous person, some people would say controversial person.
I would say
Uh,
kind.
yeah, some would say kind. That is Satine Phoenix.
Hmm.
She obviously was embroiled in quite a bit of controversy back in 2022, and then previously, I think in 2019 with the Zach Smith stuff. And so I found it interesting because across all of our platforms, we had thousands of views on our video, and we didn't have nearly the reaction that you guys did a year
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah.
And and so I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on that.
So
And I'm also interested um how you guys feel about the her as an individual, and how you handled the situation. Would you have handled it any differently in the past, looking back?
So, if I can take a stab at this first,
Go for it.
your first question was really about, you guys interviewed her and didn't get the response that we did, and I think there's a few reasons for that. One is we were the very first thing she did after her cancellation. Like, and it was a year and a bit later, but she had not been seen on any YouTube channel, any D&D space, anything really. And we reached out to her. I remember watching the whole cancellation process when it happened for her, and I remember going through and digging through a number of the things that were being allegations against her specifically, and most of them again were a lot of aligned to Jameson Stone, who was her partner at the time, and a lot of it felt to me like, wow, this is such an extreme response for what sounds to me like maybe someone who was a little entitled and maybe was a bit of a jerk to people or an asshole, which none of which is illegal and none of which is even considered in some ways abusive. I remember even the guy who was Post Malone's tattoo artist called it borderline abusive. And reading those texts that we saw, I was like, yeah, that's not a cool thing to say. And they seemed like they were jerks, but you know, to tear someone down from the very echelon of D&D and throw them in the gutter, which is kind of what the whole D&D community did at that moment, I thought was kind of extreme. So I remember reaching out at the time and saying, man, the mob really came for you. Hope you're doing okay. And that's all he said. A
To
year and a
Satine,
bit
right?
later, to Satine, yeah, to
Right.
Satine. And so when a year later happened, and I just sort of said, "Hey, it's been a year. What do you think? Would you be willing to come on our show and just chat about what happened? Because we do these stories about nerdy entrepreneurs, and there's two sides to that where people go out and they succeed incredibly, and then also there's people you've interviewed where their story changes and it didn't really go well, or they've learned a tremendous amount from a failure. And we'd love to hear both sides from you because you've had this amazing meteoric rise, and we'd love to hear about how you handled that failure and what it meant to you and what are you doing now." And we thought that'll be a really cool piece of content. We just think for our audience who are aspiring nerdy entrepreneurs who are interested in this will be a really cool piece of content. And so we reached out, we did the interview. And uh, I think when we did the interview, it was the idea was we'd be first to market with this person. Yes, the first thing she did since all of that. So yeah, we expected to have a little bit of buzz around that. We were looking to attract more followers, more people who would take interest in it. And yeah, controversy, we thought, we're not really averse to the use of controversy as a marketing tactic. At least not, I'm not, and I don't think Frank, you were too averse to it either. We didn't think, oh, we'll be attacked at the level we were, but we did invite her in to do an interview. And I will say, I don't know, Frank, maybe you want to jump in on how that interview went, but I think the interview where we were coming from was we want to dig in on her and we want to be respectful and we weren't even sure how this interview would go. And we just sort of were nice to her, I think, throughout the whole interview and got along with her really, really well. Much like your interview with her, I think was very engaging and fun, and she's just another human like all of us
I
who
thought
is going through stuff.
I thought she was great. She's definitely at the end of that interview. I remember she and I even talked about like maybe just hanging out online, just the two of us, because this is the person where if I was in her town, I would definitely let her know and hopefully take her out for a cup of tea or a drink or something. She was so nice. She was so personal to me, and she was very vulnerable, which is a hard thing to find in and out of the nerd community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And
this,
I would go ahead, Chris.
oh, but just to speak on the issue that I think that you said second was like, why did we blow? I think it was just because we were the first people who talked to her and accidentally left it in the tabletop RPG Twitter space. We didn't get any hate anywhere else except Twitter. So I just like to make sure that like I think that cancellation is sort of platform dependent, and Twitter is the place in which that sort of happens. And we have no presence on Twitter prior to this, and literally we stepped into this like hurricane of hate that happens called the hashtag tabletop RPG hashtag D&D. And we wound up getting caught up in this tornado of hundreds of hateful comments and tens of thousands of impressions of people just being like, you, how dare you even talk to someone who is an abuser? And it's like, it was just such an aggressive response. I think because we were the first ones. And be careful what you wish for.
I thought it was interesting because when I posted our show to Twitter, I got zero hate there. And I would say, I think I actually compiled a spreadsheet where I was tallying up positive remarks and negative remarks, and 76% of our interactions were positive.
Fuck, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
I did note that many of those were direct messages, text messages. With the exception of YouTube, there were a handful of negative comments on YouTube, but most
And Instagram.
positive.
There were quite a few. There's a lot of hate on Instagram.
I wouldn't say a lot. It's just there was like people would respond, and then that person would feel the need to respond. So it was like,
But you know what, Matt and I have gone out on, and this is a small tangent, but Matt and I have had conversations about this before. For some reason, more people feel comfortable sending me the message about why we suck and why this was so terrible, but they wouldn't send it to him. And we have both theorized like maybe it's because I'm a girl. And so they're like, oh, well, we can pick on her, but Matt's like this big burly husk of a man. Like, we don't want to mess with that guy. So I don't know what it is, but I tend to always get the you suck messages way more than Matt.
I might have to do my initial thought is that it has to do you use your real name online or do you just use Dracoya? So that kind of helps with separating you as a human. You feel to the anonymity the anonymous person will feel like you are less of a human because you're using a handle rather than your name, which Matt is. That's my first thought.
That's a good theory. I like that.
My other thought is men are
getting
toxic.
back to that point, like with the reactions. Getting back to that point with the reactions, I had people messaging me saying, she was always very kind to me. I spent a lot of time with her. But I did have one friend who came out and was just like vehemently opposed to me having any kind of support for her. I think she would have preferred that Satine, jump off a cliff somewhere, and so one of the things I noticed, and this kind of gets back to the question I asked about how you guys handled it and how maybe you'd have done it differently, is I kept seeing people say, particularly after you posted your response letter, well, you need to resolve this. You need to, we need to come to a resolution on this. And I kept thinking to myself, what resolution? Like, I mean, and I'll ask this second part later, but what is it because no one ever actually said what kind of resolution they were looking for. I just felt like it was strong language for the sake of strong language.
I think that if I can address that, because I think what you're talking about specifically in that case is we were in a situation where I think, it was a different presidency, which means it was a different time. And I think also there was still a lot of uh, using of social media to cancel, and that, not to say that's gone away, but that is heavily in the last 2 years really gone down compared to what it used to be, especially with this change in presidency. I just think that that is a macro condition to all of this that might be a factor into why there's less of that going on. But then the other thing is what you're talking about is what's the resolution? I think the resolution is for people to bend the knee. And to me, they wanted us to prostrate ourselves, apologize, and go away. And I think that
And take the episode down.
and
No.
take the episode down and be like, oh, and I don't apologize for much unless I believe I've done something wrong. Frank is laughing because he knows, but
It's really hard for Chris to think he's done anything wrong.
well, I'm just telling you, I don't think we did much wrong in having a conversation with her, and I think we treated her with respect. And I can sit here and defend it, but I don't even like to go in that way. But I specifically, when we were writing our letter, I was with Frank, and we crafted that word by word. We were like, this is not an apology letter. We just wanted to make sure this is very clear. We're not apologizing to the mob. You do not tell us how to act or what we do with our show or what to do with our platform. We have a platform. This is America, even though I'm Canadian. This is America. We can say and do what we want with the First Amendment. That is where we're at. To me, I think that that's most important to be standing on. And people who want to be like, you have to apologize for who you are and what you did and all these things and bend the knee, take the thing. That's what they wanted. And we're not, I at least was very unwilling to give them anything like that.
I want to back up for a second. So many great things have been said that I want to respond to, but I want to go back a couple things and talk about Satine as a person for a second, because now from your guys' experience, I listened to the interview. What do you think Satine is as a person? Like, what's her, did she seem like she was full of venom and spite? Was she kind? Was she distant? What did you think of her as a personality, as a person?
Can I address this first, Matt?
Sure, go ahead.
So what I thought was there is a person in front of me who has had some issues and trauma, as of a lot of us, have most of us. But depending on the traumas that any individual's had, it prepares you for certain types of relationships down the line in your life. And it seems like her particular genre of traumas have trained her to accept this particular person, and that it was incredibly hard for her to go through. It seemed like she had a very terrible traumatic experience in a very public way, and that didn't she didn't negate how that traumatic experience maybe impacted other people in a negative way. She never said, "Oh, well, I was perfect and I didn't do anything wrong." Quite to the contrary, she admitted a lot of the things that she did was wrong. She knew that she was being manipulated in some way, or she was being, maybe she was just doing this for herself because of how she was feeling towards a person. But she admits to a lot of these things that she was wrong. She had done that was wrong, and she was learning from it. And I think that that's really all that a lot of us can ever hope to do. None of us are perfect. Everyone's done shitty things. I can promise you I'm the villain in a bunch of people's story. But my hope is that whenever you're the villain in someone's story, you look back and you realize that's who you were now written as in their story, and you try to do something different. And I think that that's what she's doing. And she's using all of her past experiences as a villain to try and change her narrative and her life to be the hero. And it's not about what other people think. It's about her and her healing journey. And I really respect that.
What about you, Matt?
So I thought she was somebody who, if you look back at her past relationships, there was definitely a certain look to the men that she was attracted to, and also a certain personality. And those personalities were ones that really abused her, you know, but as somebody who's willing to abuse their spouse or whatever, they were abusive to others around them. But when she described Jameson as just perfect, you know, like she looked at him and she was like, he was just perfect. Like it was all, you know, the look. And you know, when I look at that dude, my immediate reaction was revulsion. I was just like, I would not want, like, I don't want to be, you know, I met them at a Gary Con and I was just like, I'm out of here, you know. And but
Was he shirtless?
he was vested with
Yeah.
no shirt, you
Yes,
know.
he's always seen, and whenever I see those photos, I'm like, well, now I know where I can do my laundry on those abs.
In general,
But
don't trust people in
he,
vests.
you know, they're that is you know, you listen to we actually have another interview with her where she dives the whole hour 20 minutes into all of this,
Oh wow.
nothing else but, you know, the cancellation and all of the things that happen. But we wanted to do this one first and we were going to kind of piggyback them. And but I definitely felt like she was the kind of person who learned how to be kind of a chameleon. You know, she would you know, she would get into a situation and she would just do things to kind of fit in and really ingratiate herself to the folks around her. And I think it was a kind of like a survival mechanism. At least that's the impression I got. Uh,
Sure.
I don't think that she necessarily in those circumstances really thought for herself. And you know, if she sees this and she takes that as a negative, I'm sorry, but you know, when you're in that situation and you're kind of like in survival mode, you know, you are not necessarily trying to be that strong, you know, iron fortress that where you make decisions for yourself. You're making decisions to keep yourself safe, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, and I think she like, you know, a lot of people in abusive relationships, they kind of bounce from one to the next one because that is the type of person that they're you know, they just somehow always slide into because of that the initial trauma from, you know, childhood in her case. And I think it's a lot more complex of a situation than most people are willing, at least most of her detractors are willing to give her any kind of, you know, grace for.
There
So
is, yeah, there is a strong element of her past. I think this goes for everybody, but her past is a bit more on display than I think most folks that are in this space. And she has definitely learned a lot from it, and I think she wears it as a great armor now. And that was one of the things I took away from our discussion with her was, you know, she talked about some woo woo shit, and it was hella fun. You know, she was talking about like her fuck, Chris, what was it? It was a holistic approach to understanding your character's journey, your hero's journey, and because she was talking about like life coaching.
That sounds very much like a her thing.
Yeah, and the big thing for me that I took away was she was kind. She was kind to us, and like Chris had said a while ago, that we were nice to her. We were nice with everyone that we've interviewed, and that's our point. That's our big thing is we want people to come to our show and feel welcome to share, because if they feel like they're on the stand, like you're not going to have great content, and great content is content that adds value and entertains at the same time, in my humble opinion. And so with her, she was kind. And so going back to this whole like how we handled it in this whole resolution, because she was kind to us, because we had a wonderful conversation with her. Afterwards, I told Chris, I was like, I got like a sisterly vibe from her. Like she reminded me of my flesh and blood sister.
I
And
agree.
and there was this good, like you said, Dracoya, like I would love to grab a coffee with her sometime and just hang out and chat. I mean, she's an incredibly busy person, and time and attention is precious. But I still was like, you know what? I don't have any desire to talk bad about her when these people are slamming us, the tempting thing to do is to just tell the angry mob, hey, you know what? Don't talk to me about it. Take up your hate with the other person. Like, we could have totally thrown shade on Satine and just been like, you know what? Leave us alone. Go take your hate to Satine. But we didn't. And I remember in the beginning trying to create this resolution, because I'm all about compassion, man. I'm all about hearing what these people have to say and really making sure they feel heard and being like, well, tell me more. Like, what was it you were upset about in our interview? And they would just pile it on. And I say, well, that's interesting. We did this and this. And they would ignore that. They would ignore what I had to say, and they would go back to their point. And that's when it dawned on me that these aren't rational people. This is all, they're saying it like there's a resolution you need to reach. There is a right and a wrong. There is an end goal that we should get to. But in reality, there is none of that to them. There is we are holier than thou. And Chris actually said this pretty good one time. Maybe you want to take it from here, but there is this righteousness aspect that the mob has.
Yeah. My impression of Satine was that she is very human. And I think a lot of people, especially when they're in the spotlight, like she was as the queen of D&D, whatever that is, for so long, a lot of people, when you're in that spotlight, place a lot of other stuff, ideals around you that maybe aren't actually applicable, right? Like, we can build someone up to be something much more than they are because they're in the spotlight, because we're looking up to them, because they have the qualities or the things or the lifestyle that we believe we might want. And I believe that probably happened for her in many, many regards, working for D&D, inventing live stream Dungeons and Dragons, being a person who's literally like world-renowned dungeon master, creating these campaigns that everybody wants to buy and having these Kickstarter. Like, how many nerds wanted to be like that or have that same thing? And when we got to meet her and talk to her, the reality is, like, that's all just image. She's a human, just like all of us. And humans have great things and flaws. And I think that when people started to realize her humanity on the other side, it became very threatening for them. And many people did feel like this thing that they placed upon her, this image that they had, was cracking. And so it became much, much harder for them to reconcile that obsession they had around her. And so for me, when we got to know her, I didn't really know her until the controversy. Honestly, I didn't really know her, but I saw the controversy happening to her, and I was just like, what's really going on here? And it felt very interesting to me for us to dive in. So when we got to meet her, for me, it was all about treating her as a fellow human and to really unearth who is she really as a person, because nobody who's in the spotlight is perfect. Nobody who is out there who we think one thing about them in the spotlight is that person fully. And unfortunately, I believe right now in society, as especially online societies like tabletop RPG and D&D, there's an incredible lack of grace for people in the world. And everyone, I think, back before there was the internet and technology and everything, life was pretty hard for most people, right? You knew nobles had it better, but you rarely saw nobles on a day-to-day basis. Everyone kind of knew we're all living in crummy chamber pots and making our own food and doing this whole thing, right? But a noble over there, that person is, chamber pot made of gold and unicorn horns on the mantle, coat made from wolf probably, right? Like, that person's got it great, but I don't have to have that rubbed in my face all the time. Whereas right now, every scroll we have we're force-fed glimpses of people who are like, having their most brilliant day in the world, right? Like 7 seconds at a time. Every scroll is like an OnlyFans dopamine dealer, a millionaire golden retriever. Like, there's people who are out there just solving Rubik's cubes in 2 seconds. Like, they're all doing incredible things. And so we're force-fed this thing that makes us think we are not worthy. And so when somebody, and this person's so perfect, And so that is weird in society versus 100 and 200 years ago, and our brains probably haven't caught up to how to deal with that. And so there's these impressions of people out there that we get to see, and as soon as they start to crack, we're willing to be like, they're not real, they're not the real person, when in fact they are a human just like us. We all know we're flawed, and we see that flaw within someone else, and we start to turn to anger and hate and vitriol because we were hoping for a hero when really we just have someone who's a person. And I think that was what we saw, at least when we got to interview her. She's just a person like everybody else. And she was probably a victim in some ways, but she also took a tremendous amount of responsibility for
Yeah.
her part and worked on herself. And who she was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, is not the person that she is today. And we need more grace in our society to allow people to have those experiences where they go from being go through growth. We have to allow that in our society and have a way for people to keep coming back.
Well, yeah, and you got to, I mean, let's face it, most of those people never watched the interview, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Oh, wait. Sorry. Real quick. One great example of that was this one guy who's like, "Oh man, you guys like just absolutely terrible." And then 2 minutes, no, it was 10 minutes later, he commented back and he said, "I actually listened to the whole thing." And I said, "Hold up, bud. Like your comments are 10 minutes apart. It's a 2-hour interview. How did you do that?" And he's like,
Put it
"Oh,
on
well,
three
I
times
just
speed.
yeah." He's like, "I just bounced around, but I heard the gist of it. I couldn't stand it. It was disgusting." And I was like, "Okay, cool. You just showed your colors. Great.
yeah, I
I'm done
mean,
with you."
and that's the one thing, like when you talk about how does somebody come back from that, because I don't think that they're really interested in any kind of redemption story at all. You know, one of the comments I got from one of the detractors, and I very rarely respond to detractors. In fact, I only responded to one because he said that we only did it because we were going to monetize the video. And as it turned out, I didn't monetize the video. I forgot to. So, um,
Matt.
like that wasn't even a thing, right? Like it wasn't. But in any case,
It's okay. YouTube monetized it for you
I'm
anyway
Yeah.
sure
for
they did. I'm
themselves.
sure they made some money off of it. But um, the one of the things they said was like, her bragging about inventing live streams and like blah blah. And I was thinking to myself, I remember when she said it, it didn't really strike me as a negative thing, but this person obviously took it as a negative thing. But having spent a lot of time, well, not a lot of time, but I've been in Los Angeles. I'm friends with some actors, and it is very hard for them to get out of the mindset of I need to be a PR machine for myself.
Oh, that's just California, baby.
Yeah.
And like I have actor friends who are like, yeah, I've got this guy lined up and he's done this and this and so therefore by adjacency I've got this and like, but I don't want to like name names right now, but the 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 actors I've known are all PR machines, and she kind of comes from that culture, that Los Angeles culture. And so when she said that and she started making a big deal about live streaming, it never really struck me as anything. But I could see how somebody who is outside of that world might have taken it like bragging, like some people look at bragging as a negative. But um, I the negative comments I saw very rarely supplied any evidence or specifics. And where there were specifics, I went to go look and I couldn't find anything. Um, I think Mark Twain said it best, where he said, a lie will travel halfway around the world before the truth even gets started. Um, and I just, I just couldn't help but feel like, it's like a snowball effect where a villain goes from you know, maybe they said some mean things to somebody to suddenly, they're clubbing baby seals, in the Arctic. And I you know, and I I actually had some mixed feelings because I did, like I said, I had friends who were like, I don't want any part of any kind of redemption story for her. I'm like, and it kind of made me feel like, if I do this, there's a pretty good chance this person's never going to want to talk to me again. But
Oh.
I at the same time, it's just like I just can't help but feel like this has been built up. The stories around her have been built up much more than what is actually the truth.
I
Frank
think
had a
that
great point about this actually in one of our episodes that we did a deep dive on this. We did a two-part episode series in our podcast about our experience of being canceled and deep diving into that. So you can check it out. But in that, Frank, you talked about dealing in absolutes. I don't know if you remember what you said there
Yeah.
around cis, but maybe you could share a little bit about that because I thought that was it's exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah, it ties in a bit actually. What I was thinking is how Satine, so first Satine had talked about in her interview with you guys, and similarly, she said some similar stuff with us, is that all of these people that loved her as a role model when she was famous and doing great, they, it was their 6-year-old selves that were like, recognizing, because when you're at the table, she says, like, it's your 6-year-old self at the table playing imagination. And all of those childhood vulnerabilities, those flaws, those joys, those hopes are right on the surface. And as soon as someone comes along and says, hey, that idol of yours, that person you admire that you put on a pedestal, and in this case it was her, she's flawed. She's flawed. She's not the role model. She's not the godlike figure, if you were to use the Greek pantheon as an example. She's not that kind of a person. I'm so sorry. She's a human being. And it breaks their 6-year-old hearts. And these are grown people, let's be clear, I'm talking about grown people with their like voice and their psyche of their inner child, and it's being shattered. And so it's just pure emotion. Like 6-year-olds, sometimes they respond to reason, but let's get real here. 6-year-olds are very emotional. They're dealing with big emotions. They're still figuring it out, and as a lot of adults are still figuring out their big emotions. And so for her, she pointed that out, like it's just hard for some people to accept the fact that my beautiful imagined version of a crystal palace in the sky is actually just some stones, and it's actually not in the sky, it's on the ground. Oh, that's actually just a house. And so as far as this like absolutes that Chris is talking about, very often, so I'll just say the anecdote part of it. I lived with a family for a period of time, for a few years. This was before and during COVID. And there's this, so there was the mom and her 2 kids, and wonderful people. And their father stepped out of the picture and ended up being like I'll just say colloquially, a basket case. He made it really hard for them to have friends, and for them to have any good people in their life. And he tried to separate them from good people. And eventually the mom, got the family to a point where she told him, get out, and you are toxic. You are not helpful. And as the kids got older, one of them, the youngest, asked his mom, I heard the story from the mom's perspective. The youngest had asked, why is dad like that? And she said, well, they're a family that loves Star Wars. And so she used the analogy of, how Darth Vader, he's a Sith. And Yoda explains this, the Sith live in absolutes. It is 100% this or 100% that. It is right, wrong, black, white. But the Jedi, they believe in that light touches everything in varying grays, varying amounts. And so the Jedi see everything as, well, yes, and, or no, and. And so when you have these absolutes, shades of gray, not 50, just all shades of gray.
God.
And so when you have
these people who live in absolutes and that can't see any other way, they're just fighting for the empire. They're just seeing it as like what I'm told to do. What I believe in my core of cores is the only right and the only wrongs. There is no other way. And you remove compassion at that point. There's no compassion, like Chris is talking about grace. There's no acceptance for growth. There's no acceptance for flaws. And when you get to that point, it's really easy to be controlled. It's so easy to be controlled as a mob.
And,
That's well said.
yeah,
Oh,
absolutely. I think we live in an interesting day and age where when you talk about absolutes, and this maybe has to do with Satine, but I think kind of is pervasive through our hobby, the RPG hobbies, where you see. I remember Dracoya. We did a video about a year ago where they made WotC was making a big deal about how they were replacing words in their books. They were removing words like civilization,
And race.
darkness, race.
Barbarian.
Barbarian was removed. Civil, like they were like there was this litany of words that were removed because they were either non-inclusive or were prejudiced against some group or another, or had negative connotations, or could be triggering. I hate that word, but could be triggering for certain people. And um, and to me, I found a correlation with like, and I think this is kind of trite these days because everyone throws it out there, but like, kind of Orwellian in that they were trying to curate language and um, remove the words they didn't like, replace them with words that they did like that already existed that mean the same thing. Like if you look up we were like, if you look up the definition of some of these words, the definition lists the word that they removed. You know, so it to me it's kind of like how long before that word then has the negative connotation and they have to replace that word, and there's that seed in 1984, that chapter where they were talking about how they were shrinking the dictionary down, and pretty soon it was only going to be this thick. you know uh the because you control the language, the idea being that you control the language, you control the population, right? And I think that's obviously very hyperbolic in the terms of role-playing games, but I also found it to be kind of uh, I struggle to think of a better word, but like anti-intellectual. Like we as adults can't handle the word darkness or dark elf.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think you're
and
right.
yeah,
It's
it
very
was
paternalistic, maybe is the word I find is when I hear you talk about it, it sounds very paternalistic. Like, oh, we have to take care of these little kids who can't really handle something so dark as Dark Elf, or we have to protect everybody. And I just,
yeah,
yeah, I get,
and
I
and
get shivers when I think about that.
the
I know,
thing.
right? And what that's doing to people, I think it's just raising a lot of people who just can't take care of themselves and then look
Can't
up
cope.
to other people. They can't cope, can't take care of themselves. They freak out when like the toilet seats gets backed up. Oh God.
The world needs to
And
change for me.
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Where the first thing that you learn in trauma therapy is that the world doesn't change for you. You have to figure out how to put your big boy panties on and deal with it.
immersion
I
therapy
want
type
help.
thing.
I still
You
want
know,
help with my big
but
boy panties.
and the thing that always stands out to me is like every every single generation has had their own language, right? They make their impact on language, but this seems to be the first time where we have a generation saying you have to use our language or people are going to die. There are going to be people who kill themselves because you use the wrong word. You you don't validate their existence or whatever. And I always felt like one of the words that I hear thrown around a lot, even amongst this group right now, is the word partner. Like I would never call my wife a partner. I would always call her a wife because to me, it partner removes the kind of emotional connection that I have with her. And it used to be you'd say partner and you immediately you'd think business partner. Like that
Yeah.
that would be my generation. Like I would say, I got my partner
Well, and
over here.
maybe
Well, can I just jump in on this because I run
Sure.
into this exact thing with Frank because I often refer
oh
I often think to myself as like, oh, he's my partner in terms of business because I always thought about it like that. And I'm from that generation of like, oh, Frank's my partner and but I realize now if I say that the implication is different.
yeah.
People are going to think, oh, that's so cute. They do a podcast together. Like, that's not exactly the vibe I meant. Whereas, like, for me, my girlfriend, I call her my girl, like she's, my girl. And I feel like I'm the only person in my entire world in Vancouver, Canada that says, my girl or, my girlfriend. And so I get where you're saying where you're coming from there because that language has changed for people in terms of what I say and I just want to be accurate with what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
so if
Because
I
I'm in
say,
the
and
yeah, if I say
that's
Frank is my
like
partner, it
like
doesn't
like
mean the
going
same as
back to
that.
the idea of it being forced on you.
Yeah.
I was at a Starbucks one time and I said I am going to order this for my wife. I don't remember the exact context. It was some food or drink or whatever, and the guy said partner. And I said wife, and he said partner, and I said wife, and he rolled his eyes and then he walked away. And
Oh,
that kind of stuck with me, and that's when I really started like thinking about language being kind of strong armed.
as someone who uses the term partner for my girlfriend, yes, I am that kind of a person. It is because for me, when I say girlfriend, it feels childish. It feels like it's very high school. And that's probably just a me thing, and that's fine.
I can see that.
But when I say partner, I get reactions from everybody. They're like, I joined a group of TTRPGers online, and they're not from the West Coast like I am, and I would just say partner, and they would kind of look at me funny, and it is that like same kind of thing. But I would never correct somebody to saying partner because I don't feel like I have the right to tell somebody how to talk
I agree.
it's the
unless they're
need.
dropping the N bomb. Then I'm like,
You
yo,
can, yeah.
yeah, I can't get
Yeah.
away with that, buddy.
There's a lot of, and I think that what you're talking about exactly is that it's the need to correct, the need to, go out there and say, hey, you're not doing what everyone is saying you should do. And I think that again, when you're in a place where you're demanding the world change for you, um, it's a dangerous place to be. However, I do think that what we're dancing around is because it's difficult. It's more complicated because there are times when we do need to step in as people and actually do something about it. And even in the nerd spaces, I think that has happened a number of times within the nerd spaces. Even specifically, I talk about, say, like the OGL scandal that happened. A few years ago where WotC was attempting to do something that was fairly unethical business wise and heavily damaging to all the creators in the entire industry. And it was a really big like FU to the community, and the community rallied around stopping that. And to me, that is actually like, hey, we need to stand up and do something. There are moments where that is required, but the nuance of like, when do you do that? Like everybody wants to be the hero in those situations, right? And in those moments where we did it right with the OGL, I think everyone said, yes, I'm so glad everyone did that. And thank goodness. But then when you get to something that's a little more complicated around like an individual like Satine or saying the word partner or something like it's harder to know where are we supposed to be doing and acting because people do want to be doing the right thing.
I would love to. Okay, so this is a perfect segue. Thank you, Chris. I love it. It's like we planned this. But one of the big things I wanted to share was what I learned from us nearly being canceled. And to give a little context, we actually haven't touched on how intense our response was from the community. We had one post that garnered 110,000 impressions on Twitter.
Whoa.
And it gained 200 comments, some of which were us, but 99% of them, of the 200 comments, were hateful. We had one nice comment, and because I remember scanning through it, and then within about 24 to 48 hours, we had a response letter that gained another 80,000 impressions and another, I forget how many comments, but all of them got 5 likes. We got 5 likes out of all of this, and one of them was me, and Chris kept canceling my like.
Yeah, I'm like, stop liking our own posts, Frank. It's so lame.
Yeah, so that's me. So that was the intensity of it, and like I said, only one guy was kind, and I want to remember what he said because it was and I didn't see it till months later when I had the courage to go back through every single comment, and he said, "Hey, I found your podcast because of this explosion. I like what you guys are doing. You got another follower. Keep doing what you're doing."
Yeah,
and
I actually went through and read them all.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you understand. So this
some have disappeared, by the way. I don't know why, but some have.
There were a lot of
They
deletions,
were
a lot
probably
of scrubs. Yeah.
Well, we go, I don't know if we have time for it, but we go into depth around the psychology of these haters. But the thing that I learned from all of this, and kind of, so before, when we started the podcast, I was very concerned about offending people. I was really concerned about, I want everyone to like us. I'm going to do my best to make sure that I don't offend anybody, that everyone feels welcome listening to us, and that we bounce perspectives. We're going to talk about some uncomfortable stuff probably, but that's going to be okay because I want to set an example for any listener that it's okay for Chris and I to disagree. It's okay for anybody to disagree and for us to get along and still be friends.
Does
and
this
to
sound
continue
familiar,
the
Matt?
podcast.
Yeah, you and I had that same conversation. Like,
We did.
Jacoya was worried about getting canceled. I was like, my whole opinion, my whole life has been the attitude of fuck them. You know, like,
Yep.
you know,
And I was like, no, we need to treat everyone with respect and make sure that everyone feels like they can have an opinion, whether or not I agree with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Chris and I are the same kind of dichotomy there, where Chris a lot of the time was like, fuck them. And Chris even said, like, Frank, if you weren't here, if it was just me, I would rip all these people a new one. Like, they wouldn't even know what kind of hate was coming at them. And I was like, man, like, I don't know how to handle this right now. So it was really intense for me. I mean, it was intense for both of us in different ways. And
all for just talking to somebody.
All for just talking to
exactly.
somebody.
And treating them nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the lesson for me was that there are people, despite the things I've said, like, you know, trying to rationalize with them, trying to get on their level, to understand their perspective, and realizing that there is no way to do that. There are people out there that just have an axe to grind, and you are going to upset them at some point, even if you don't do anything that's bad. Like we said, talk to a person who has some controversy around them. And in the big scope of things, not a really big deal. Now, to the people who were affected, to them, it would be a big deal. But that's not the bigger picture, because keep in mind, 110,000 impressions, only 200 comments. How big is the TTRPG space? Probably bigger than 200 people.
Yeah.
Probably bigger than 110,000 people.
Maybe.
Probably up in the millions. So when you're thinking about those percentages, it's not that many people. They're just really loud voices. So all of those like realizations helped me accept that we are going to upset some people, and some people walk around waiting to be upset. And when those people also have charisma and they can recognize other people that have been hurt and offended, their charisma can rally all of those people and turn them into a mob. And they can use that mob, that following, and they can go after people who are easy marks like us. We were a very easy mark. Keep in mind, the mob didn't show up until 2 weeks after we released the interview, which was hilarious. 2 weeks, we lived in anonymity. Nobody knew of us. And
then just one person was like, "Did you guys see these guys over here? They did something awful." And
pitchforks and torches.
Well, this is the other side of it and we've kind of danced around all of what Frank said is I agree with there. But also one of the things that I think helped us psychologically in terms of not taking every single thing personally and turning into self-hate was that, especially on Twitter, they're all trying to grow their own platforms. So if you can create a great sick burn or be part of the mob that goes out and pitchforks and burns the witch, you can help grow your own platform. There are incentives built into these platforms that is not necessarily healthy for people. And so if you're wondering why something happened, always look where the incentives are. That kind of activity is incentivized on places like Twitter and other places, on social media, but especially on Twitter. And so the idea of reacting to what we do and then doing a sick burn and like commenting and piling on and having an even better burn than the last person, like that is what was happening. And so to me, it wasn't like, oh, they all hate us personally. It was much more about, oh, they're all trying to get their own attention and build their own thing by using us as this sacrificial lamb. And I keep thinking of I think the quotes from Roosevelt, but it's not the critic who counts. It's the man in the arena. I know it's a lot longer than that, but it's something in that area.
Yes.
The person in the arena, if you will, because it really does matter. Like if you're going to step out into the public and you're going to interview people, you're going to try and do something in the world. I'd rather have some sort of reaction of people loving or hating. The worst is to wallow in mediocrity and anonymity because no one cares. And so being willing to be in the arena, you have to be willing to take the love and the hate.
And that's, yes, 100%. And that is the part where if you want to be a content creator, you got to know that is going to happen, which I did not know that it would happen when we started. I thought we can avoid it. We can do our best to care for anyone and everyone. And I say we, but I really meant myself. Chris, I can't control Chris. He's another human being. I like Chris. He's going to do his own thing. We're going to be partners in this.
Yeah, partner.
And so knowing that is going to happen would be my little bit of wisdom to any content creator that's thinking about starting, that is starting. Like, shit will happen. And then the other side of that is you will survive, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be painful. It's not fun by any means. And the next step is Chris and I had each other to support each other in this, which was huge. Whenever I told other people about this is happening, I would get mixed reactions from the people that I love. They would say, "Man, I'm sorry. That must be hard. Like, I can hear how hard this is on you." And I would say, "Yeah, this is taking a toll. I'm losing sleep. I can't focus very well. I'm obsessed with this I was obsessed over 5 days at least." And then other people will say, "Hey, any publicity is good publicity." And to them, I just wanted to say, shut the fuck up. Like, you don't get it. Like, from your perspective, especially the actors that I told to, because I retired actor here, I would usually tell them and they would say, "Hey, any publicity is great publicity." I'm like, you don't get it. Like, I'm a human. These people don't get that I'm a human. And this actually really hurts my feelings that they say this, they don't listen, and they think they can keep saying this.
Well, it's funny,
it's going to happen.
When we invited Satine on, she was like, "Are you sure you want to do this? I mean, the last time I was on, it's going to be bad.
The last guy's got torched."
And I'm like, "Yeah, well, I'm sure we want to do this." Like, even more so. I'm like Gen X stubborn about this. Someone told me I should do it. I got to do it now. And, we gained followers from it, or subscriptions.
We also lost a lot of followers.
But the net gain was more substantial. And this actually made me.
We didn't, by the way. We didn't. I'd say we broke even.
Yeah, I'd say we broke even a little bit.
Well,
it makes me think of, when we did our videos on the wheelchair thing, the
Oh,
original video on the wheelchair thing where we came out against wheelchairs and RPGs, there was a lot of negative comments. And then we did another video on the wheelchair, just doubling down, where I was like, well, I'm in a wheelchair, and here's why this is all bullshit, you know?
Mhm.
And that they didn't know what to do with that. Like, wait a minute, he's in a wheelchair? We're supposed to be championing these people. Like how
Yeah.
many like I have wheelchair support groups who are like, that is ridiculous. I would never want to pretend to be in my wheelchair. If I had a chance to like even just pretend to be able-bodied, 100% would take it. Like,
I think
and
almost every single comment that we had, if they were a person that was currently in a chair or their spouse or partner or brother, sister, parent was in a wheelchair, they agreed with us. Funny
Yeah.
enough, it seems to be the people who were never in chairs or the people who were in chairs quarter of the time. And yeah, I definitely got into some arguments with people lately at Gen Con about it because there's a huge push now for a lot of TTRPGs to create wheelchair characters. And I
Hmm.
tell them, I'm like, do you realize how insensitive and shitty you're being?
yeah,
And
it's
they're
all
like, well,
Yeah.
I think
performative.
you're being insensitive and shitty for not being inclusive. And I'm like, well, why
Yeah.
don't you just get in a wheelchair and then you can tell me how it feels?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
like I was just like, if you want to like represent what it's like to be in a wheelchair, you have to take all of the negatives that are, and it's not just going up or down stairs. You have to take all of the negatives into account, like hours a day of medical procedures I have to do every single day. And, that just feasibly is not possible in a wheelchair. Like, so by making a character in a wheelchair where you basically are accommodated, like they have this magical combat wheelchair that is so brilliant that a normal adventurer should want it. Like you can levitate up and down stairs and like like all these things. Like it made 100% of everything accessible. And I was just like, I understand that the girl that made it is her heart was in the right place, but it's performative. It's like you're not representing the person that's actually in a wheelchair dealing with those things when the only negative that you have is the fact that you can't, you're shorter than everyone else because you're always sitting. Like that was literally the negative of a wheelchair. And the folks that were just piling on negative comments, once they found out I was in a wheelchair, were just like, but we're fighting for you. And no, you're not. You're not. You are just doing this performative thing that is meaningless,
Yeah.
and a little bit insulting.
And the idea that you need someone to fight for you is also demeaning too in many capacities. And I don't experience this myself, but my girlfriend is black, and so when she talks about this specifically, because we see it all the time, even just more recently with like the Sydney Sweeney thing that happened with the whole
Oh, yeah.
image and like jeans or whatever, and everyone went crazy about that. But then she comes to me like, who is everyone? Who are all these? I don't know a single black person who gives a crap about this or said a single thing about it. This just sound and everyone who's complaining about it is white. It's like what is going on here, right? And so this is just a problem of people wanting to be on the right side of something and feeling the need to be using it as a way to promote themselves, which is again, like, where are the incentives? Social media incentivizes people to do these kind of things and try to create this like other and or champion things or try to be the hero. And I don't know that that's I definitely don't think it's necessarily healthy, and it definitely isn't necessarily a way to truth for us as a society.
Yeah,
I
my
think
kids are mixed race, and they were just like, wait a minute, people are mad about this?
Yeah, right. It's
You
like
know, like
people like who are you talking about, right?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
absurd. It's
I
absurd.
think I think of something that um so I've already hinted at, I didn't hint at it, I straight up said that I care a lot about what other people think. And I've always been that way. And as an adult, that's been a journey to care less or to care about the people that matter most, really. And so with therapy, it's been quite the journey. And so my therapist recently commented on something, and she said something, I think it was Carl Jung she was referencing, who had said something along the lines of, the way people act is really indicative of their own inner fears, and the things they care most about are super telling, or very telling of their inner fears. And so I think of these people who are very conscious about, I want to be, like Chris said, on the side of the right. I want to be on the side of the right. Well, what does that say about them? Well, it says maybe they're afraid that they're not on the side of the right most of the time. So they're actually thinking, hey, I want to keep all this attention on these other white hetero guys that have this nerdy business podcast. And we're going to point out how they're not diverse. They're not inclusive. They just platformed an abuser, in their words. And they are an easy target. And I'm going to put all the attention on them so that no one ever looks at how flawed I am, because I know I'm so incredibly flawed, but I don't even want to talk about it. I don't even want anyone to know my name or even look at me.
And
So
I'm
you get
definitely
these
not going to
people-
work on myself. That's
Yes.
like that, because that's the other side of it too. Is a lot of this is like, I will agree that Satine talked about this too, like the projection that people put out. People do project a lot, and I think she said in your interview, everything is a projection. I don't know if I agree that everything is a projection, but I think there's a lot of projection that happens in these online spaces, and that is absolutely incentivized again for people to just point fingers and not ever reflect, because this social media is not a mirror. Okay, it's a laser. It focuses outwards, and keeping that in mind, you can direct that laser at other people and shoot them down and burn them up. That's the whole process of being online.
Well, I think the anonymity of the internet allows for people to react before thinking, and they think they're safe from consequences as a result. Um, and life is a lot messier than that, than what people are willing to, give people grace for. And I do think that we live in a time where there is a great deal of separation between real life and your own personal experiences, because people are so isolated, and it's easy for them to be judge, jury, and executioner. You know, sitting there thinking, yeah, I'm going to agree with this person because then I'll feel like I'm on the right team. Like we're all piling on because we're right. But so often life is much more complicated than that, and yeah, it's definitely something that I think about when we do our shows, because we've done a lot of shows where we talk about kind of the culture around gaming and the culture and the cultural impacts of, like, say, WotC, you know, naming a character Thaco the Clown, or their executive coming on and saying we need less white folks in this hobby, like,
Oh, don't forget the Mexican orcs. This is my
and the
favorite.
Mexican orcs, and it's like, um, I think, and we have a video coming out about this pretty soon. I think that WotC has finally realized how badly they messed up. Because, like, if you look at their big releases for Christmas, the big release is a book geared towards kids, role playing for kids. Like there's a 110-page Artificer book, which is like bare bones as you can get, but there's this Wizards and Warriors books that's for little kids. Like, okay, I think we've burned our bridges with all the adults. Let's start focusing on the kids now.
There's
So
there's been no shortage of problems WotC has done
it's
to
crazy.
do that. Like you I think the big, if I had to succinctly say what WotC has screwed up on is and I'll just say I want to do a quick plug for a book that I think is really good. You may have read it. Slaying the Dragon by Ben Riggs is a really great book on the secret history of Dungeons and Dragons, and it really talks about the transition from TSR to WotC actually buying the company. And it's weird because in that book, WotC is kind of the hero that saves Dungeons and Dragons from closing down and becoming this thing that just could not support itself because, like I said at the beginning, nerds don't really do business very well. And TSR was a great example of that. If you read the book, you'll see what I'm talking about. But I think WotC had this great positioning for so long as like they could have been the heroes of D&D that have made it into this thing and grown it and given it to the community. And the fact is, I think they believe because they own it, right? Because they have this intellectual property, they feel that because they own it, they can do what they want with it, and they should be doing things with it that make them the most profit and make them the most powerful, and continue to undercut and use all these corporate business practices, which is really not in the spirit of nerdpreneur dumb, right? Nerdy entrepreneurdom. And I don't think they realize they don't own it. In fact, the Dungeons and Dragons, the whole idea of playing a game in your mind with imagination is not owned by them at all. It is owned by the people who do that and come together and actually share those experiences together, who build upon the culture and the community and share how to do it better and connect better and make these things even more epic than they were before. And every time they've screwed up, it's because they're taking their glove and saying, this is ours, we're going to do this with it. And it just winds up pissing everyone off because it's like, no, it's ours. We don't even need you. We just want you to support and help the community and make it better for us to do this imagination game together. You don't own that. And it's so misguided, the people at the top, that they don't even realize they could lose all their positioning as the main game because that's what they've luckily had for so long. But when the OG, I'll just do a quick plug. I did the OGL scandal came out, and I did a diss track of the whole thing towards WotC. And in that, I literally rhyme like I think it's 50 different alternative tabletop RPGs that are out there. You don't have to play D&D. There are so many other things out there, and they think, oh, we got this thing. They just don't really get how on the cusp of this they could absolutely fall from and lose it all, because there really is a lot of other options out there.
You're going to need to send us that link. We'll include it in this video.
Oh, please.
You know, and I did read that book. I have a few critiques for it, but yeah, I you know, and we all have our own personal biases, you know, and I read it, I felt like he was wrong in some places and correct in others. And but I definitely think that WotC has fumbled tremendously in regards to the ownership of the game, exactly how you described it. And I think it began when they started pulling in people from Microsoft to be at the top of, you know, Chris Cox and those guys.
Yeah.
Because from that world, yes, they own the source code for that game. There is no imagination that goes into the game. The game has a program that takes their users through it, you know, and it's a big giant decision tree, you know, and whereas D&D is a big open sandbox, and it's a completely different animal. And they also misjudged the legacy of of D&D and how much it meant to the fans. So like Thaco the Clown, for example, was a huge deal amongst people my age. Like they were like, I'm done. You know, like, you know, just because you can't subtract two numbers doesn't mean I'm a clown, you know? And you know, once they started losing those demographics, and really slipped rapidly if you take a look at the numbers. I think that Professor Dungeon Master at Dungeon Craft, his YouTube channel. He's got a couple videos on D&D sales and how they just nosedived, particularly starting after the Tasha's book. Uh, you know, it it's just deeply insulting to have these folks come out and say the things they say and write the things they write, and then expect like, oh, there to be no difference in their sales. Um, it's it was almost as if like they thought that they could just throw anything out there and it would sell.
Well, keep in mind, so a little bit of context. I worked at WotC for a year. It was not a glorious job. I was in their customer support call center, and I I really, 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 really wanted to get my foot in the door there, and I really wanted to work on the D&D team, and I was the D&D guy in the call center, and everyone else was Magic the Gathering because that was their bread and butter. I remember at the time that they were really struggling you could tell they wanted to become a big company. At the time, they were about 500 employees, which feels like a big company, but it's actually more on a medium scale company. And they really wanted to be like the Microsoft, like you said. They're bringing in talent, experts, professionals from these other companies on these C-suites to, like Chris Cox, to elevate them to that big company level. So they started their own studio. They started trying all these test experiment products, all of this to try to become that big company. And then they eventually realized, let's just fold all our energy and eggs into the two IPs that we know do well, instead of trying all these smaller things. Like they did a Transformers card game, which is actually really fun. They did a couple other things, and now they've folded so hard into the two IP that they know. If you guys follow Magic the Gathering just a little bit, like Final Fantasy crossover has exploded so much. I just heard in the hobby shop that they did a new print run of the same Final Fantasy set because it did so freaking well.
And they're doing Avatar: The Last Airbender now.
I know, yes. And so they're doing all these crossovers because it's a good way for them to get people into the game, but it also makes it a much more collectible experience than their own fictional characters and IP. So they're seeing this. Their focus has been on the dollars for a while, but especially in 2018 when my contract was not renewed at Wizards. That's what happened. I didn't get fired. It was just a contract. Let's be real here. And those folks were the signs were clear. They were moving in this direction of where can we get the biggest bang for our buck. They also did things to scale back the benefits for full-time employees. They have a really cool in-house currency system that based on the time that you've been there, you get currency you can use to buy their product. And they started to dilute that, they diluted it so that it wouldn't go as far. So they were finding all these ways where they could make more money so they could invest more and go farther and get bigger. And so this is one of those things where it's kind of hard for nerds to grasp that, like, I'm not saying this is good by any means, but as far as a business perspective, WotC's doing what businesses see as the right thing, which is get bigger and better and bigger and better until you have to consume. You're just a machine consuming dollars and users and IPs without a soul to it.
That's the hardest thing with role-playing games, right? Which is why they attempted to go to the route of Sigil and their VTT. The problem with role-playing games is that once you sell the 3 core books, there's no guarantee that the subsequent books are going to sell to the same folks, and sales inevitably begin to trickle off. And so they were hoping with the VTT they could start leveraging microtransactions, and they were all about I'm going to have a stronghold, and you're going to be able to buy curtains for your strongholds in the microtransaction office, but the bottom line was that role-playing games are a social interaction, and the
And they live in our
VTT, I don't
imaginations,
think,
not on a
yeah, I don't
website.
think that necessarily the VTT lends itself to that. Sure, there are
No.
plenty of games that play online, but for them to be successful, and I know that we did some computations as to how many folks would need to convert to the sigil. But for them to be successful, they're going to have to steal a lot of players away from Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds and the others, where you had to buy the dungeon master had to buy all the core books and all the subsequent books for them to be valid in that online platform. And so that's a big investment. And WotC was not offering any relief to come and play on their platform and say, hey, come to our platform and get 60% off these PDFs that cost us nothing. No, they weren't doing anything like that.
Yeah,
So
very out of
Yeah.
touch.
It's funny.
very, they definitely fumbled that ball big time, because it's a
And
big money investment to make that change.
And also, I mean, I think this gets kind of at the heart of what Frank and I do in Nerdpreneur, is that there is a difference between entrepreneurship and nerdpreneurship. And one of the reasons and one of the things we have discovered by interviewing dozens of these types of businesses is that you cannot discount understanding the community, right? Understanding your market at a very deep level. And I think that, why, here's a great question for WotC executives is why isn't everything Dungeons and Dragons coming out positioned as like, oh, if D&D made it, it's the best. It's the highest quality and it serves the community at the highest level because they could easily do that if they really understood what the community wanted and what the community needed. Like, for example, Dungeons and Dragons terrain. I've invested in one of those boxes. It's the worst like terrain thing I've ever seen. It doesn't go together. It's a bunch of crap. I'm like, how did someone say yes to this?
The miniatures
Why?
are garbage.
Yeah. And the minis, compared to what we actually can get from somewhere like Lethal Shadows, I'll just give them a shout out. High quality, awesome memes or minis. I would just say that. But D&D, sorry, no, not good. Really kind of crap and not very detailed. So what I'm trying to say is like, why isn't that their positioning? Because they hold this place within our market as like the game, but they just fumble so hard understanding their community. And one thing we have seen time and time again by interviewing these nerdy entrepreneurs is they are nerds first. We decided to name it Nerdpreneur, not entrepreneur. I know some people out there would be like, who are these dumbasses who didn't think of the first pun, entrepreneur? It's already in the, because being a nerd comes first. You gotta be a nerd if you want to succeed in these nerdy businesses. And I don't think these people really get it at the top because they aren't part of that community. They don't really understand it at the deep level. So how in the heck can they help us and serve at a different level? And I've seen this time and time again with WotC. So that's where I think Nerdpreneur, if they want to hire us, we have a very high consulting fee. Let us know. We'll be there
That's
for you
funny
if you
you
want to
should
bring
mention
us
that
in.
because I saw Chris Cox interview. And again, he came over from Microsoft, but he was talking about he was talking about how he played in dozens of games, regular games. And Jacory and I are like, nobody's
Dozens?
time to play in dozens of
Oh
games.
no, he was saying he plays in like 40 games a week. I'm like,
He
there's
clearly
no,
has no idea what that means.
yeah,
No, like he does not play the game.
yeah.
Or maybe he does, and it's like purely like once or twice.
Well, and
He
But
it
doesn't
was
he doesn't realize that he's counting Magic the Gathering games.
Yeah.
maybe,
Well,
maybe.
he
and
was
also
also
with
using that as an excuse to incorporate AI. He's like, "Oh, I play 40 games a week, and all of these people definitely want AI in their games." And I'm like, "Well, first of all, there's no way you're playing 40 games a week because you're right, Frank. Otherwise, he probably doesn't know what he's doing. And second of all, that's clearly a confirmation bias. Why don't you go out there to a random like a hobby store and ask them what they think about AI? Better yet, just come into the miniature painting community." There was a big painting company, I won't name who, but there was a big painting company that has had a really recent scandal this week because they published a bunch of AI garbage. And us as painters, we're very adamantly against AI. I know that if I do anything with marketing, anything that has any sniff of AI on it, no.
Canceled.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll be
How
out.
dare you?
Uh,
Mhm.
yeah,
No.
we use real brains here. And although I will say in one thing about AI as a dungeon master, or a game master, if you will, I find that using certain parts of AI can be very helpful in planning, organizing, and also being able to create certain aspects of the game that I want. So, like, actually, there are some really useful things as a tool that, imagine if they were willing to embrace that side of it. Hey, we're going to make you a better DM by
Yeah.
creating an AI that is going to help you around position, instead of like, no, we're going to replace you. The core thing that people do in the game. You mean the thing that I get to express all my creativity and write my stories and do the thing? You want to replace me? Like, they just have no clue like how much that's going to piss people off. Give me a tool that allows me to do this better and allows me to be a better dungeon master for my game, for my table, because AI is totally able to help in many ways and aid, but it is just crazy to me that they don't understand it.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
agree.
They do not understand what their customers want, essentially.
Well, guys, I know that we could continue going on for hours because we clearly have so many amazing things to talk about. And maybe we will need to do a part two because I have a whole slew of topics that we didn't even get to touch.
We'd love to
Yes.
come back sometime, and we appreciate you reaching out to us and being willing to chat with us, for this amount of time. And yeah, we had a great time. I don't know about you, Frank, but I'm saying I had a great time doing this.
Yes, I completely agree. It's refreshing to talk philosophically, go into the more nitty-gritty topics of this side of nerddom.
And if I can make a quick plug, you can find us on all podcast platforms if you want to hear some of the interviews that we have done or hear our story with Satine and how that worked. It's, I think, 2 or 3 episodes ago, whenever this is going out. And you can find it under Nerdpreneur everywhere. And nerdpreneur.com has all our episodes as well. And I did send you the link to my rap.
Oh,
So
I got it.
if you want to check that out, please link it in the bio or whatever. It is
Put it in the
it,
description.
it it
We
needs
will.
more. It needs your audience, because I wrote it for the exact audience that is here and understands what the OGL is, and I think people will really dig it.
All right, guys. Well, as always, like, comment, subscribe, and come back to have another round on us.
Woohoo!